Blue blood heat check. Top targets for traditional powers. Most of these schools are outside of the top 10, and by most, I mean all of them. Right now, Nebraska, the Cornhuskers, Matt Rule, they're sitting at number 45. Their past 3 finishes have been 18, 25, and 41. A couple of the names on the board, and boys, I'll just chalk it up, put it out there, and you guys can go with it wherever you want. TJ Lateef, talked about him yesterday on the show, the quarterback from Origin Lutheran out there in California. Christian Jones, a top 247 prospect right there in state. Jack Lang, is that correct, Tom? Did I get the pronunciation right? Offensive tackle. Tell you what, turned on his tape this morning, like him a lot. Got Cortez Mills out of the state of Florida, huge fan of him. And then Keelan Abrams out of DeSoto in Texas. I'll tell you what, I know it's a wish list. Drew, Tom, either of you can take it, but I mean, shoot, if Nebraska finished with 3 or 4 of these guys, I'd be really impressed.
Well, we discussed TJ Lateef earlier in the week. I think he'd be great to follow up behind Dylan Raiola. To me, the one that really jumps out, Cortez Mills, right? Nebraska sitting 45th right now in the recruiting rankings. All 3 of those kids are in-state prospects that are committed. We know they want to get down into Florida. Matt Rule did that when he was at Temple. He did that when he was at Baylor, and he scored big. I mean, Tyquan Thornton at Baylor was a kid he pulled out of Miami-Dade. So Cortez Mills, to me, that's the one where I'm like, okay, let's see if they can get him up to Lincoln. And I think about the quarterbacks they have or the quarterbacks they could have, Raiola, TJ Lateef, Cortez Mills, dynamic route runner. I think that's where he really excels at creating separation. I get fired up about that potential marriage between those two. And I think they need this type of wide receiver. This is what Nebraska needs. So for me, that's the one that kind of jumps out.
My crystal ball for Cortez Mills is on Miami. But like I said, when I first put it in, the one school I'm watching is Nebraska. He seems to like them a great deal. He's got a great relationship with the coaching staff, and they are one to watch. If somebody's going to dip into the Sunshine State and get that one done and steal him from Miami, it could be Nebraska. I still like Nebraska for TJ Lateef. Been kind of close to crystal balling them for a long time. I just haven't pulled the trigger. I probably should. I think they are far and away the leader right now. They are recruiting him harder than ever. He's going to be there for an official visit in April. But there's still a weird storyline when it comes to Texas that I'm watching, and we talked about this before. There's just something uncertain when it comes to Texas and their quarterback commit KJ Lacey, and maybe Alabama and eventually gets involved there. But I'm hearing that they've reached out and had some communication with TJ Lateef. They've reached out and had some communication with Keelan Russell, the SMU commit. So maybe they're just covering their tracks and making sure that they don't get left at the altar. But that's just something that, like, if Texas loses KJ Lacey, I think Texas has, especially with the relationship between Steve Sarkisian and TJ Lateef and the respect that he has for the Longhorns head coach, they could dip in and pull off the upset as it is now and beat Nebraska for Lateef. So that's one I'm watching. A couple other guys just to throw out. I know you mentioned Christian Jones. I think that's kind of a Nebraska Notre Dame battle. He's going to be in South Bend for their spring game in April, and then for an official visit on June 7th. Had a teammate land there last cycle, and I just feel like that's a dark horse there. But I think the smart money, safe money, is on Nebraska. And then Jack Lang, another Notre Dame-Nebraska battle. I kind of lean towards Notre Dame, but there's some things behind the scenes, including multiple visits to Nebraska that are already lined up. So keep an eye on Nebraska there. I think they could pull off what I think many would consider an upset over Notre Dame. And Jack Lang, like you said, Cooper, big-time talent. He's the real deal. So,
Tom,
well, I'm glad Coop likes Jack Lang. He's in the All-American Bowl, committed to play in the All-American Bowl.
Appreciate that.
We haven't had positional cross checks yet. So, a lot of these guys, sometimes I'm like, it's a surprise, Drew. You've been there, right? It's like first time you're seeing a guy, and then you go check the rank, and you're like, oh, nice, a pleasant surprise. I'm glad we got him where we're supposed to have him. Tom, any feel that Nebraska is like, I don't want to say amping it up, but do you feel from an NIL standpoint they're starting to kind of get it together a little bit?
I think Dylan Raiola kind of checked that box pretty clearly, in my opinion, and I just think they're trending for sure in the right direction. And but I don't know if that's necessarily going to be what lands them some of these guys. I mean, you talked about if they can land 3 of these guys. I don't think NIL would be the difference maker.
Cortez Mills, they're going to have to Yeah, they're going to have to be involved in that game. Would be
I mean,
my
yeah, going up against Miami, but at the same time, I don't know. I think that for that kid, especially relationships, playing time, connection with the coaching staff, and quarterback play, I think that's going to play a bigger deal than just cash and money and value. I don't know. I just see it a little differently, where I think that I feel good about my Miami pick, no question about it. But I think Nebraska, more than just money, is doing a great job there, and they have a real shot.
Relationships matter in March. Come talk to me in December, and then we'll see where we're at. Cortez Mills, I got a text this week from a director of player personnel in the SEC, completely unprompted. Just says, "I love Cortez Mills," and I was like, "Hey, we were talking about him the other day on the show. That guy can roll. The crystal ball is on Miami right now. We're big fans of him. We talked about Jack Lang, certainly a guy that we like. I think Christian Jones is like the epitome of what you would expect of a Nebraska Cornhuskers. So Nebraska, team to watch right now. I believe only 3 commitments, number 45 right now per the 24/7 Sports composite team rankings. Another program, Drew, that I would say safe to say has an up arrow when it comes to high school recruiting. Let's talk about Florida State, Mike Norvell and the Noles. They're already in the top 20 in 2025, number 19. Their past 3 finishes, 12th in 2024, 19 in 2023, 20th in 2022. So everything I just said reflected there in their rankings and what they've done in the last 3 years. A couple names that stand out that Florida State would be hoping to finish with: Myron Charles, Zaire Addison, Kevin Wynn out of the state of Georgia, Gregory Xavier Thomas, and one of my favorite, Tavian Wallace. Drew, is there one name in that group, which is a super talented group? Is there 1 or 2 names in that group that you're like, okay, I really like that fit in Tallahassee?
Oh, I'm going to give you 3, right? So Zaire Addison, think about pairing him with Solomon Thomas on the offensive line, who they already have committed. Addison, I think he can play anywhere up front. And, he was very impressive in Orlando at the Under Armour All-American game. Ton of schools involved, easy to see why. But Mike Norvell, Alex Atkins, they continue to prioritize these offensive linemen. So he's one. And then the two big, heavy Chevys up front, Myron Charles, Kevin Wynn. I think it's a limited pool, not only in the South, but nationally for interior IDLs. Myron Charles, I think the tape doesn't match the traits just yet, but Florida State's in there. He is someone with some developmental upside. So him, and then Kevin Wynn, I don't know if we've ever talked about him in this space. I mean, he's just a pocket mover up front, can hold up traffic, flush them out of the state of Georgia. FSU, our guys that cover it were asking me for some information on him, kind of before we came out with our most recent Top 247 update. I'm like, oh, okay. So like Florida State's all in on Kevin Wynn. So those are the ones for me, Coop.
Tom, what's your feel on Florida State right now? Temperature check. I mean, just in terms of being around it, it's been a couple months now since you've been assigned to your new position. What are you feeling with the Noles?
I like what they're doing. I mean, if we're talking about Big 3 and in-state, I'm not necessarily – I wouldn't give them the number 1 nod compared to Miami and Florida right now, but I really like what Florida State's doing. And I like what they're doing with this group. I think that they have a great shot to land Myron Charles, top 247 defensive lineman. I think that they are very much in it for Zaire Addison. He's going to official visit Florida State, Clemson, and Oregon. I think USC's a sleeper, came on a little late. He's been there a couple times, so don't rule out the Trojans. And then Kevin Wynn, like you said, Ivins, I could see Florida State getting this one done. I think Georgia's definitely a contender for the top 100 in-state kid along the defensive line. So you got to watch out for the Bulldogs with just about everybody, especially the in-state guys. But Gregory Xavier Thomas, seen him a couple times live, really, really like him. Florida State's probably the one to get that one done. I feel good about that. My crystal ball is on the Seminoles over LSU and Miami. And then lastly, Tavian Wallace, another one that I absolutely think Florida State gets that one done. And over Georgia, South Carolina, Arkansas. He's, according to Zach Blostein, who does a phenomenal job over at Knowles 24/7, Wallace has claimed Florida State as his leader multiple times publicly. So we'll see if that stands true and if they can get it done.
Man, love that kid. 10.84 in the 100-meter, but, he reflects it on tape. Love the way he plays speed and space. Brother, getting ready to go, probably day 3 of the NFL draft, was a guy that was highly ranked for us, played his ball at Kentucky. Trevin Wallace there. Drew, you might have touched on it a little bit. I like this Zaire Addison kid. I just talked about it, right? I'm watching a lot of these guys for the first time. He's pretty interesting to me, though. Like he's a guy with pretty long wingspan. I think closer to 7 feet. One of those body types you got to build up, but he's only 6'4". Where do you kind of see him from a position projection standpoint?
So we originally listed him as a tackle, or graded him out as a tackle, moved him to IOL, and then moved him back to tackle after I saw him at that Under Armour camp. I agree with you. I think he might be athletic enough to play on the left side after some years of development. I mean, he's got a wrestling background. I'm a fan. I agree. And versatile up front. I think that's the name of the game, volume shoot. I'll say this about Florida State's class. What I also like about it, 4 commits right now. They're all from the Sunshine State. So you got Solomon Thomas and Tramell Jones up in the Jacksonville area. That is a key city if we're talking about the recruiting landscape in Florida. Then they got Javion Hilson from the Space Coast, where they shoot the rockets up in the air at Cocoa High School, and Ethan Pritchard, linebacker out of Sanford Seminole High School, which has turned into a bit of a FBS factory. Like, I think it's notable that Mike Norvell and his staff are going into these different parts of the state and kind of planting a flag. They go down, and if they're able to get Gregory Xavier Thomas out of Plantation American Heritage, where Pat Surtain used to be the head coach, that'd be another notable win. And then Zaire Addison, he's on the other side of the state. So, FSU really prioritizing in-state talent, and I think that's been a focus for Mike Norvell here ever since he arrived.
Guys, a little PSA. I've just been informed we have hit over 10,000 views. The new time slot. Let's go, baby. That's firing me up. Guys, like I said, if you got questions in the chat, make sure you're firing them on X. You can also do it on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're on the airwaves, leave a review for the boys. We give out rankings all the time. That's your place to do it. I don't know if that's a good thing that I'm encouraging you to do that, but you get the point. All right, the last team here that we got to keep an eye out, and honestly, one of my favorite teams, I think, to watch over the last 2 years, recruiting-wise, how about Tennessee? They're just there at number 12 right now. You think about their past 3 finishes, 13, 10, 17. I think one of the biggest surprises that nobody really talks about is, like, Tennessee is a very legit recruiting operation under Josh Heupel. And I don't think that a lot of people really expected that. Not to say that it would be deficient or that it wouldn't be adequate, but they're above average. They're above average. They're good. That's where I would put Tennessee as a recruiting program. And Drew, you think about what they could get done here. You got guys like Jamie French, one of the best receivers in the country, still on the board. Redarius Jackson, household name in the 24/7 Sports Scouting group text over the last week. David Sanders Jr., the number 1 tackle in the country. Lagonza Hayward, Andrew Ivins, big fan of him. And then Marion Dye out of Indiana, the number 37 edge in the country. So, Drew, Tennessee, man, these names out of all the 3 programs that we went through and we talked about the possible finishes, this one got me the most excited.
Oh, they got their quarterback, right? George McIntyre. I think the story with Tennessee over the past 2 cycles has been building the depth on the defensive side of the ball. Now you look at some of those names you just mentioned, Lagonza Hayward. I mean, he's a dude. What is he? Is he a safety? Is he a hybrid, maybe some type of backer? I don't know. I want that guy on my team. Excited to see him on there. I'm going to ask Tom. I mean, you read off David Sanders. What's the latest on Sanders?
Nothing's changed for me, man. I still feel really good about Clemson. Had a conversation with an offensive line coach in college football this week that made it pretty clear they feel Clemson leads. But I'm going to hold off on my crystal ball pick. I know he's got Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, a couple others still very much involved, but I don't see it. I don't see anybody beating Clemson at this point for him. So that would be, if Tennessee can get that one done, it'd be huge. But I think the Tigers get that one done.
At what point do you put in a crystal ball? I feel like your crystal ball insecurities are playing out live. I mean, earlier in the show, you were
talking a lot of crystal ball picks. That's what I've been known for the last couple of years. It's ridiculous. The hate percentage is pretty strong though. Like if you really dig deep, and I don't change a lot last second, I feel like I got a pretty strong hit rate. But I just want to be patient. David Sanders, he's allowed to be patient with his process. I'm allowed to be patient with my process. All right. So just take it easy. All right.
Cooper,
right. Yeah.
Cook on Redarius Jackson since you're such a big fan of him.
Yeah, I need to hear the backstory on this. Go ahead.
Let me cook. I mean, We had our audit here of Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee. I still have Kentucky to do this week. And what I mean by that is, a lot of time is spent on the top 247. And then when the time allows, obviously we get to our regional recruiting and our scouting as well. So a lot of time to kind of catch up on the tape. Darius Jackson was a guy that we had ranked as a high 3-star, 89 overall rating. You go look at him, just a lot of bounce. I love the profile, 6'2 plus, around 180 pounds, basketball, track and field. I believe he's going to participate in this spring. So I'm excited to see that. And also the collegiate feedback on him is super positive, and obviously that helps. But everything you watch on tape, just the way that he plays, it's kind of Courtney Crutchfield-ish. I wouldn't go that far. But if there's a player that kind of reminds me that had two-way snaps that you feel really good about, that you really don't know, is he going to be a receiver? Is he going to be a defensive back? You get curious in a good way, like, hey, this guy could blossom into one of many different things. So just on the audit, came over him, like him a lot. I think he's a really good dynamic player. I think what we are waiting for right now is the context to kind of catch up to the tape, and I think we'll have that here in a couple months.
Just to add on that, Ryan Callahan, who does a great job over at Go Vols 24/7, he made it very clear. Despite, and again, I don't. It's not a dig at you guys, but despite his 3-star rating, Tennessee is just very, very high on this kid and top of the board. Like, obviously, everybody's going to be talking about Jamie French, but they love this kid, and that was a good early evaluation by them. And I think that recruiting effort that they're putting forward and treating him like a 5-star, treating him like a top of the board, I think that's what gives the Volunteers the edge over Ole Miss, Auburn, Oregon, and a couple others. So in the end, I really do think that Tennessee gets that one done. Despite, if you go back to the other receiver, Jamie French, I don't see Tennessee winning that one. But again, coming off a great visit to Knoxville, he's just there this week. So, keep an eye on the balls, but my crystal ball for French, remains on Ohio State.
Drew, Tennessee's receiving core kind of has I don't want to say Washington feel to it, but I feel like one day we're just going to look up and people are going to say, who are these guys? Where did they come from? And I'm talking about guys like Nathan Leacock and Braylon Staley when you think about those type of guys. And then you think about a guy like Darius Jackson, Mike Matthews as well, right? The highest ranked guy out of all of them. And Nico's going to be the guy to make those guys go. I think that's what that really fires me up. You think about what Tennessee has on the perimeter. I mean, dude, I'm excited to see Tennessee Rocky Top. I think we're going to see it's not going to be too far off from what we saw 2 years ago with Hendon Hooker, right? I think that offense is getting ready to click. I'm super excited, and I think, quite honestly, I mean, dude, they had some guys, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman. These guys that they got coming up, they might be young, but they're dynamic.
Ethan Davis at tight end, and I wrote this down because I wanted to get it in. Talking Tennessee, I like the running back commit Justin Baker out of Buford High School. He reminds me a little bit of Jalen Wright, who is preparing to go in the NFL draft. Sounds like he could go day 2 now. Put on the tape of those two side by side, I think there's some similarities. Now, he's only ran for 700 yards the past 2 years, but I like that when you think about the big picture of this recruiting class. I think he fits the offense.